So let's talk about execution. First of all, what does it mean? So as context, I built and scaled an education technology company from Washington, D.C. for over 10 years. And we scaled it to millions of dollars in revenue and profitability and operations and customers all across the United States. We helped 1 million kids to become prepared to go to college using our software. And that was a very, I think, exciting, adventurous, painful journey in being a founder, and I think you would find that in common for any founder. Execution was something that I assumed I understood because I had built a successful company. So I assumed I knew what is execution and how do you do it. Then I joined Facebook. And Facebook is known as a company that is probably best in the world at execution. There are companies that are better at other things, communication, strategy, maybe deep scientific technology, although we're pretty good at technology too. But the number one attribute of somebody who succeeds on Facebook is execution. And I have to admit that when I first came to Facebook, I thought I understood what execution was and how to do it. And I really didn't know it well. And over the course of the next months and time that I spent, I came to understand that execution is the high velocity, so fast, like you said, high quality, so that's effectiveness, or good. The high velocity, high quality doing of a project that moves a number which is representative of a value to the company. So doing a project fast and well that moves a number that represents a value that's useful to the company. So execution is defined as what I just described, and I have frequently seen that execution is actually not a strength for many startups for whom execution is life or death. So one of the questions we have to ask ourselves about execution is whether we're actually good at it or not. Do we do lots of projects really well, really fast, that move a number? So first let's go around the room and remember, as you answer this question, that the only way for us to succeed is to keep scaling as a founder. Identify the weak points and get better at them. So I was always really pretty strong in insight, vision, strategy, inspiration, recruiting, raising money, but I didn't really understand execution very well until I came to Facebook. I have to admit that. So how many people here would like to work on their execution? Cool. So we have a lot of people who want to improve their execution. Now let's go around the room and ask, what makes you feel like you need to get better? What could you be better at? For everybody who raised their hand, I think you raised your hand. Tell me why you feel like you want to improve your execution.
Maybe I can build a balance between quality and speed.
Okay.
And it's so important to where your quality bar and where your speed bar in an execution phase.
So you want to be able to balance between quality and velocity.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Who else raised their hand? All right.
Sometimes we just lose focus, honestly, and when you lose focus, you don't know which number you should be improving at like a single time. So like we have a bunch of numbers, and because of that, we lose velocity because we increase a little bit that number and a little bit the other number. But instead, like if we focus and concentrate, that means like we can just really drive one number.
So focus is it, because you want to improve your focus.
For us, yes, execution has to be perfect, and focus has to. We need to work on focus.
Totally understand. Yeah, I've experienced that myself. Who else raised their hand going on this side? Yes?
For me, I think the worst thing is I sometimes feel overwhelmed with urgent things, but are not the important things.
Urgent versus important. That's the perpetual challenge of startup. I think that's an interesting one. Hey Jeff, would you mind capturing some of these on a whiteboard or something like that? Thanks, man. So we had balancing quality velocity, focus, balancing urgent and important.
Yeah.
Cool. Who is next? Is it you?
I second my three colleagues here. Basically, yeah, we lose focus from time to time.
Yeah.
And we obviously sometimes focus on the wrong, urgent but unimportant stuff. So yeah.
Okay. Cool. I think we had a few people on this side. Yes.
For me, big challenge is a long chain that, in case of my business, if you want to deliver anything, there's like a lot of parties involved. And it usually goes bad somewhere in the middle. So like,
So you're saying that you have a lot of partners that you have to work with, and a problem happens there.
partners, employees, customers, like the execution of what the customer wants until we deliver to the final receiver.
Yeah.
Which is in our case, it's a passenger inside of a taxi. There's like the whole chain, like what the customer wants, how do we translate it into what we can do, what the developers build. Afterwards, like how do we execute on a taxi company, how they execute on taxi drivers. We had lots of issues, like somewhere in the chain, losing track of what's happening.
So we could say that for you, you also have a focus improvement that you want to make, which is driven by the complexity of the ecosystem you work in. Okay, that's an interesting problem. And how about you?
For me, it's encouraging my teammates to execute better. I mean, our team is a perfectionist team, so.
Oh, what team?
Perfectionist. I mean.
Perfectionist team.
Yeah, so they are trying to do things great, but getting things done is slower to do so. So there is no balance. I think it's not enough. So.
Interesting.
Yeah, I agree with this one.
I've definitely experienced that. We're going to talk about this. I'm excited about this one. So we had quality and speed, focus. Okay. So did anyone? Yes, you had one.
It's about that we are, I think, lacking some skills in our team, like not enough people in the team. So as founders, we do lots of things, trying to do a lot of things at the same time.
Yep.
I think that's slowing us down. Like we want to do sales, product management, like even coding some things, like attending this program.
Yeah.
So I think that's slowing us down.
So wait, I'm not sure I totally understand what you're saying. So could you restate that? You're saying you have an execution problem because what's happening?
Because like we have lots of responsibility. The same person trying to
you're
do
wearing
lots
many
of things
hats.
at the same
Yes.
time. So
Yes.
because like initially you don't have the.
So do you see this as causing a focus problem or a quality problem or?
Speed problem. Like we are doing working with like 6 customers at the same time. But if we had like another analyst, we will be doing like 20 different POCs at the same time. So it's slowing us down, like the team size being small.
So team size reduces speed.
No, I think he's saying, what Ostan is saying is like lack of resources, right, in the team.
Yeah,
like,
also like sometimes losing focus, like trying to do lots of things at the same time for one person. I think it's,
resource allocation.
No, I think it's resource constraints is one, and too many objectives is another. So we'll chat more about that. Did you have one very quick?
Yeah, it's like a combination between focus and prioritization. It's like.
And what prioritization?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because you establish a goal, a project, and then the day tomorrow it appears like 3 small projects you have to attend to because being a founder.
Yep.
So what do you do?
Totally. And by the way, I still have this problem even at Facebook. On the way here, I was like, how do I stack rank everything I have to do today? Okay, so this is what we're going to do for execution. We're going to do this a little bit differently. So, yes, Balaji? This is interesting.
From Cologne, Germany.
Balaji.
This regarding the team delegation, because we are executing in a team.
Yeah.
I find it really difficult to delegate a task on a day-to-day basis between all of them in one team.
You're saying delegation is a challenge because it's hard to know who to delegate to or hard to know what to delegate?
But actually, this is my second startup. In my first startup, I was a lone founder. And now I have partners, so maybe on a personal front, I find it difficult to delegate but I also don't see, that kind of picking up very fast, founding teams over there. So it's like most of the things fall on my head, and that is a kind of bottleneck for our speed.
Understood. Okay, so delegation is a challenge. Okay, so what I want to do is walk you through the Facebook framework for how we think about execution and how to run a team. You guys are all running teams. How do we run teams at Facebook? And then I want to go round robin and group some of these challenges that we're seeing and come up with at least 2 tactics for the key challenges here that are actionable that you can take back and use today. Okay, so in terms of the Facebook framework, I'm going to just walk through it. It's actually fairly straightforward and simple, like most frameworks are. Then I want you guys to ask me questions if it's not understandable. So when we think of running a team, we first start with the qualitative description of the mission. What's the mission? What are we trying to do? So in my startup company that I built and scaled, our mission was to increase the number of kids from impoverished backgrounds who go to college. That's the change we wanted to make. And I would be curious as to whether you guys are at a state today where you all have like a one-line mission that describes qualitatively what you want to do. What's the change you want to make in the world? So can we raise hands for who has a sentence for their company that explains the mission in one sentence that anybody can understand? So how many people have that and they're really proud of it, willing to share it? Okay, let's hear from both of you guys. Yes?
So at Public Bus, we want to help like every small business sell more using influence marketing globally.
Beautiful. Okay, I understand that. How about you?
Give companies artificial intelligence for running their business so people can focus on growing it.
Give companies artificial intelligence so that they can focus on other things, basically, on growth?
Yeah.
Okay, interesting. So what we do is we start with establishing a qualitative description, just a mission statement. But you have to be really careful with your mission statement in the sense that you don't want to over-invest time in it, because at the end of the day, no one's going to succeed because their mission statement looks really good, right? You also don't want to under-invest in it because of the second step in this framework, which is the quantitative measure that you're going to try to make go up. What's the number you're going to increase, which demonstrates that the mission is being completed? And we call that setting a metric. What metric are you setting that you're going to judge the success of, right? So just to give you an example, I lead the growth team right now for Pages, and in Pages is a two-sided market. That two-sided market is business owners, we call them admins, business admins, and consumers, people who want to connect with businesses on Facebook. It could be, the coffee shop down the street, or it could be Nike, right? So we need to know, are we succeeding in both sides of the market? Are we helping to drive up a number that demonstrates success for businesses? And are we helping to drive up a number that demonstrates success for consumers, right? Now, it turns out that in order to answer these two questions, like what's the mission and what's the metric, those two questions, you actually need to answer some foundational questions. And so I made up a framework, which now we use in different places in Facebook, called the impact stack. Impact stack. So stack, like reference to technology stack, impact is obvious. So what's the impact stack? And the impact stack is just 4 questions. Who's the customer? What's the problem? What's the solution? How do you measure success?
How do you measure?
How do you measure success? So before you actually even try to define the mission and set the metric, you want to start by asking these foundational questions. Answer the impact stack. Who's the customer? What's the problem? What's the solution? What's the measure that you're going to use, right? And if you answer that question, by the way, you can judge how well a startup is likely to be doing by how clearly they can answer these questions. Doesn't that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
Right? Okay, So, who feels that they have an absolute lockdown answer? So if Mark Andreessen was standing right here, and he's like, hey, you know, I'm gonna write a check for $5 million to one of you right now. You just have to answer these 4 questions. Who feels very confident, like 10 out of 10 confident, that they know the answer to this, and it is really easy to understand? And actually, let's invert that. Who feels not confident about this? Raise your hand. Unconfident.
No.
So raise your hand really high so I can see. So about half of you, but half of you feel very confident. You're in the middle? Okay.
You can also ask who feels
Like-
very unconfident and who feels very confident. There's something in between,
In
right?
between.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
It's not either or.
For instance, I will like say for our side, like we
Yeah.
haven't like understand like the measurement side because it's always on the client side. So we have like as well as you have like we have 2 sides of the problem, like
Yeah.
bronze and
Yeah.
influencer.
Got it.
Yeah. So cutting to the bronze, we help like them to find influencer, for instance, from Turkey, like in the US.
So you're saying you have a 2-sided market. There's the brands and the influencers. So in other words, companies and influencers.
Yeah.
And so what? Let's start with let's answer the impact side for you. So who is the customer?
Small medium business.
Cool. And what's their problem?
Finding and starting working with influencers, like how to find, choose right, and start working with influencer fast.
Interesting. If we had more time, I would probably push you a little bit further, because it sounds to me when you say this problem, you're describing the inverse of a solution that you have to offer.
Yeah.
But actually, if you keep asking deeper and deeper questions, we might find that what they're looking to do is market more effectively. And if we push even further, they're trying to make more money through effective marketing, and this is a subset, right? So I'm not saying you're not on the right track. I'm saying that I think we could potentially optimize this a little bit. But let's
Like
yeah?
they want like to save their time, like to be honest, like kind of do this. So we are saving time for them, like and they don't want to spend like weeks of searching, choosing, writing to them, conducting.
And then solution, what's your solution?
Solution is fully automated like platform where they can create campaign, choose influencer, and run it in less than 10 minutes.
Okay, that's pretty crisp. And what do you think is the measure here on both sides of the market today?
For a brand side, it's like returning of the investments, but it's for each of them are different. Some of them are looking for brand awareness. Some of them are looking for increasing their sales. Some of them are looking for increasing their likes on like Facebook pages, Instagram like profiles, and so on. So it's depends.
Interesting. Okay, so it sounds like the measure is still a work in progress, as you said earlier.
Yeah.
So here's the thing, guys. From an execution standpoint at Facebook, we are asked on a routine basis at the beginning of every 6 months to present a plan for what we're going to do with our team. And when we go to present this plan, we have to present it in the way that I just described. And this method is used by most of the top companies. So you have to be able to ask your foundational questions and answer them. You have to be able to set a qualitative mission, like what are we in the world to do? We're here to X, right? And then you have to set the right metric. You have to set the right metric, so that's the third step. The fourth is, now you build the roadmap. And what is a roadmap? One of the things that used to just drive me crazy when I was at the Stanford incubator building my last startup, it was so hard to find good examples of roadmaps online. Even though Google exists, and there's lots of stuff out there, and when you type in roadmap for products, it comes up with lots of stuff, but I just wanted someone to explain, like, what is a roadmap and how do you make a good one, right, for your company, product roadmap. And so that final step is, now that you know what number represents success. So for example, Uber recently announced that the metric they're gonna drive is complaints per ride. Complaints per ride. That's all they're gonna focus on, is they're going to make complaints per ride go down. That's their goal. Imagine the focusing power this gives to a massive or a tiny organization. You know that you are doing a project that matters if it makes complaints per ride go down. If you're doing a project that does not do that, you're working on something that is not impactful, according to the definition of success that we've set out for this quarter or for this half. Does this make sense? So investing time to set the right metric is probably the most underdone activity in most startups, because you think things like, well, revenue is really important, and cost is really important, and profit is really important, and growing user numbers is really important, and traction is important, and I don't know, billing per customer. Yeah, there's a lot of options. But if you're really good at what you do, you take the time to figure out not that numbers matter, but which number matters and why. And you should be able to defend that to the most rigorous questioning that the smartest business person you know can put you in. Why did you pick complaints per ride? Why didn't you pick revenue per ride or revenue per city? Like, why did you pick this metric? So, does this make sense to you guys that metrics and setting the right metric as a representation of value is an important component of focus in your team? Right? Does this make sense? And when you build a roadmap, did you want to say something?
No, just a question. But
yes, please jump in and ask a question.
How do you break down into teams? So each team should have like their own statement, or
yeah. So it depends on the metric that you're trying to drive, and you should organize your teams in order to drive that metric. Which, remember, metric alone doesn't matter. It's the metric that makes the qualitative mission actually come true. That's what matters, right?
So but you said before, for example, that in Facebook every 6 months, each of the teams, I guess, should present like their own plan. But is it aligned to one metric, like company metric, or you have like your own mission statement for pages and another one?
So there's a corporate mission statement, which recently got changed to focus on community and bringing the world together. And then each product has a mission. So Pages has a mission, Groups has a mission, every product has a mission. Then each team within each product is going to try to set a metric that's going to make the mission of the whole product come true. Now the roadmap, what does that mean? It's actually...
So it's only one metric per mission, not two, for each product at Facebook?
No, that's not true. And I have to be careful what I disclose because
of course,
confidentiality obligations. But I think this is actually fine to talk about because this is actually true for most major tech companies. Setting a metric is a science and an art. So data scientists in our company are responsible for analyzing metrics and figuring out what goal to set for a 6-month period. And they work with product and engineering and the product group leaders to come up with this, but fundamentally this is work that the data scientists in our teams do, okay? And in answer to your question, it's ideal to have a single metric because it's extremely focused. But sometimes what we'll have is a counter metric or an operational metric. So let's say that we're optimizing for growth, and I'm making these numbers up here, but we target a 13% growth rate in a specific product line. One of the unintended consequences of setting a metric is that it might cause a different valuable metric to actually go down. In growth, a classic counter metric is quality. Because guess what? All you're trying to do is make more numbers go up. More users do this and this and this and try this and this and get more value from your product. But are you really doing this with high quality? What's your conversion rate? What's your click-through rate? Is that going down or is that going up? So sometimes you can set a metric and a counter metric that's going to help you grow with quality. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah.
So,
I have a question, Kash.
yes.
Well, in the initial stages of a startup, how do we come to a consensus on what is the metric that we focus on? Because I think in the initial stages, from the customer point of view, there will be a metric which is more important. Then from the product developer's point of view, there will be another metric which is important. And from the investor point of view, there will be another metric. So how do we focus on actually coming to a consensus in the initial stages?
So what I would say to that is we should break that problem into two. The first and most important question that's relevant to what we're talking about is how to set the right metric. What is the right metric for you? It doesn't really matter if you have consensus or not consensus if you're driving the wrong metric, right? A second question is how do you build consensus? So right now I'm addressing like metrics and how you set them. Consensus is a different problem. I would argue for you that you as the founder and as the founding team have to have a strong aligned point of view on what the metric is The customer should not tell you what the metric for your business should be, nor should a business partner, nor should a board member. It's you. It's your responsibility as a co-founding team to identify that metric. And then consensus is, I don't believe anymore, the right word. Today, I think it's more appropriate to say alignment. And I would even argue minimum viable alignment. So who is the smallest number of people who need to be aligned in order to make this whole thing successful? Not every customer is going to agree with you. I had a customer, my biggest customer, I don't want to name who they are, but my biggest customer in my previous company, in our first contract, they wanted me to give them my personal financial projection for how much profit I'll make from the engagement with them, so that then they could negotiate with me what was a fair profit to make. And I was like, what? No, that's not what we're gonna do. That's not how it works. So I would say, like, Balaji, we have to break up the concept of consensus and setting a metric. First, let's focus on the metric. Consensus, I would argue you should think more in terms of alignment, but start by getting a strong point of view between you and your co-founders on what the business metric is. So, roadmap, to just finish that, right? So you have your foundational questions, that's the impact stat. Then you have the mission statement, that's the qualitative. Then you set the metric, that's the quantitative. Now you build a roadmap. What's a roadmap? Simple, a list of projects with a numeric value next to each project that rolls up to drive that metric, a set amount over a period of time. That's it. So
can you repeat those?
Sure. Yeah, so what is a roadmap that is effective? A list of projects, let's pretend it's 5 projects, that you're gonna do over a specific period of time. Let's say 1 quarter or 1 half, we call it half, 6 months, right? Mm-hmm. Each project has a number associated with it, which is a subset of the metric that you set. So if you set in your metric, let's take your business, I'm going to increase the number of companies. That's the metric I'm going for. So you want to increase it from, making up numbers here, but like 10 to 20 over the course of a 6-month period. Okay, you're going to do 5 projects. Each one of them might have, 2 customers you'll get, 4 customers you'll get, 3 customers you'll get. And this is important because companies are complicated, and theoretically you could work on anything. You could work on employee retention. You could work on scaling the tech platform so concurrency is greater. You could work on a lot of stuff. But the beauty of execution comes from focus. It comes from knowing what are we doing, and equally as important, what are we not doing? And the answer to what are we not doing is any project that doesn't move this number, which represents a qualitative win. That's what we're not doing. This is how you focus. And the next step in this is to get a sense of scope and like a baseline. What is a fast project and what is a slow project? So I worked in the past in Washington, D.C. We had some really great engineers there. You can have great engineers really anywhere. But I didn't understand how fast you can really move until I worked at Facebook. We have some of the best people in the world, and there's a very high expectation of what you can produce along what timeline. So we'll have sprint meetings every 2 weeks. We'll be like, okay, what's this bi-weekly sprint gonna result in related to that project, which is gonna move this number, which rolls up to this number up here. And people will literally be like, yeah, I can do that in 2 hours. Okay, this one's gonna take me half a day. That one's gonna take me 2 days to build and launch this feature and test it. So I hope I'm communicating to you a very clear picture of how do you install a framework for excellent execution in your team. Yes?
2 questions.
Mm-hmm.
One is for a 2-sided marketplace,
Mm-hmm.
like the one you're involved. How do you keep only one metric? And then the second one is how do you make sure that everyone sticks to the metric all times? Because what I've seen is people tend to focus on one thing and then they just slowly.
Yeah, that's a normal state of things. So the question here is I have a 2-sided market. Several of you guys have 2-sided markets. How do we have one metric? The answer to that is you don't have one metric. In a 2-sided market, you have to have 2 metrics. That's the answer. So and then you just have 2 teams that are one driving this one driving the other one. In terms of maintaining focus, guys, focus is a habit. Some people have the habit of focus, some people don't have the habit of focus, and some people, as you said, are in the middle, developing their habit of focus. And you can use certain tactics and tools in order to develop the habit of focus. One tactic I would strongly recommend is bi-weekly product reviews. Don't worry about the term product review. That just means status check. And
like sprint meetings.
exactly, a sprint meeting. But the key is, I know this sounds very like tactical, but I want to give you guys actionable things you can do like right away. So I don't know if you prefer to do it online or maybe you have a room where you can print it out. But literally print out the execution framework on a giant thing on the wall. And it should say, like, in this quarter, our mission is this, our metric is this, we're gonna do 5 projects, here's the numeric value of each project leading up to this metric. We're gonna have sprint meetings on a bi-weekly basis, let's pretend that's what it is. And when we do the sprint meeting, we're gonna walk right up to this printed out or written down plan, and we're gonna ask, okay, this team of people is working in this project, how's that going? Are we gonna hit this target, yes or no? So the question you ask in that sprint meeting is, what was your progress up till today? What's your plan going forward, and are you blocked on anything?
Challenges, yes.
Yes, exactly. Are you blocked on
progress,
anything?
challenges,
Yep.
and
solutions, yep. And that's it, and then just move that really fast. Have a 15-minute to 30-minute meeting. That's another thing I learned in Facebook. Every meeting in Facebook is 30 minutes long. You would be shocked by the serious stuff that gets figured out in 30 minutes. That's because of one word, focus. We know what matters, and we come in ready to talk about that and only that, and we're always trying to, as quickly as possible, get out of this meeting and do the next work that we have to do, right? So that's another tactic I would recommend to you. Consider implementing 30-minute meetings. One of my flaws as a founder was that I thought that by sitting together a lot and problem solving together for a long time, we could come up with some amazing answer. But guys, you know what the real truth is? We don't have the answers inside our head. We also don't have the answers even in the room. Answers are outside of the building, inside the customers. This is why this question of perfection is a really important one that one of the founders raised. Done is better than perfect. The reason is, the more you iterate on delivering to customers, the more you're gonna learn the reality of what they actually want, not what you think. Done is better than perfect. That's another thing I would recommend. Okay, so let's see how we're doing in time. We have 11:30.
We're right on time.
Man, I'm so tempted to talk more about execution. Okay.
I think we all are.
Yeah.
Yes.
Will we be able to share this page of slides?
Yes.
Sure, we can share this stuff.
Okay, awesome.
Absolutely.
Uh,
That'll be in your drive by.
One last question, please.
Sure, please.
What about projects that are more qualitative, like setting up the blog or doing something more non-numeric?
Yeah, that's a great question. You're asking questions that are exactly the questions we wrestle with every day. First thing I want to explain is, there's no one answer for any of these questions. It's basically whatever's gonna work. All you can do is be intentional about figuring out what your highest priority opportunity or problem is to address, and then trying to take a reasoned, thoughtful, framework-driven approach for how to fix this problem. If it works, great, keep using the framework. If it doesn't work, get a different framework. So your question here was, what about quality? Qualitative work, not numeric, right?
Yeah.
And I would say to you that, first of all, what you said matters, meaning the metric you set and the qualitative mission you articulated either was valuable or wasn't. If it is valuable, then it's gonna be better for you to reject all the qualitative stuff or a lot of it and keep focused. So focus is the first answer. That's why we said we're doing this. Or we find out after some period of time, 3 months, that, oh crap, this is the wrong metric or something. Now be careful of resetting metrics and all that frequently, because then you thrash your team and you're not really like focused, right? But one simple way to do this, because the truth is you always do need to do some quality work, right? Just use the 80-20 principle. 80% of your time focusing on the metric, 20% of your time focusing on some qualitative work. But I want to urge you, I was almost like afraid to actually say this out loud because I feel like it's counter to the lesson of focus I'm saying. If your team is really good at focused execution, then consider this 80-20 rule for the next like 3 to 6 months. But if your team is trying to build its execution muscle, teach yourself and build your habit by on purpose rejecting all kinds of qualitative stuff. Just be like all into the execution and the focus. Do that for 6 months, your team's gonna be changed. You're gonna think different. So saying no is one of the most powerful techniques for focusing. Because in startups, we're so desperate to succeed that when we talk to somebody who seems like they're interested and maybe we should go meet them and fly over here and make a presentation, actually, wait a minute. What was our mission? What's our metric? What are the projects? Are we doing the projects? And do I have time away from these projects to do another project? If yes, is this project going to lead to success in this metric? If it's not, then no, I'm not going to do this project. Even if you're a really smart guy and maybe you could be my advisor and we want to meet, but actually I'm going to execute. That's what we want to be doing. Does that make sense?
Perfect.
Yes.
Sorry saying that we should all come back home.
It depends on how you want to invest your time. That's your choice. Yep.
How do you balance that? Like, it's a personal story, but like one of our challenges has been that we don't have enough profitability.
Mm-hmm.
And on one end, we're trying to increase our profitability by trying to go to more customers.
Yeah.
And on the other hand, we're trying to like find a new product market fit so that we can just like do some other business so that we solve like a bigger problem and then move company to a different state. And that has been a major source of debates amongst our team because on one hand we are grounded because like we need more money.
Yep.
And on the other hand, like